The train travels from Visp to Zermatt, and you sit at the window, quite relaxed. It's May, late May, and the train climbs higher and higher into the highest mountains of Switzerland. The Visp Railway is old, wonderfully old, familiar, full of history, full of generations. You notice how the altitude puts you into another state, a gentle, drowsy state between reality and dream, between waking and sleep. Beside you sits a woman, tall, strong, muscular, with the knowing eyes of someone who's spent much time on mountains. Years. Decades. She's a keeper, a glacier spring keeper, a guardian of the sources. And May is the most important time when the springs awaken again, begin to flow. The snow melts from above, water flows through underground channels, and the springs, the sacred, mysterious springs, need attention and care, love and respect. She tells you about her work, very calmly, very thoughtfully, like someone who has a sacred task, a sacred responsibility. She goes into the mountains, far up to the springs, and checks on them, provides for them. She cleans them with a gentle cloth if necessary. She documents very carefully how they flow, how cold the water is, how the water quantity changes through the seasons. She has old, precious notebooks in which generations of keepers, of grandmothers and great-grandmothers have written their observations, their love, their thoughts. The glacier springs are mysterious, yes, very mysterious. They spring from the ice, from the deepest snow, and they're cold, so cold, crystal clear, of incredible supernatural purity. Some are well known, famous, people pilgrimage to drink the water. Others are hidden, secret, only a few people know them, only the keeper knows them precisely. This keeper here beside you knows them all, each single one, lovingly, patiently. You imagine how tomorrow morning she'll go up, very early, into the glacier world, the ice realm, the kingdom of snow and ice. The paths are difficult, sometimes dangerous, very dangerous. There are crevasses, wide, deep crevasses, ice masses, unpredictable things that change. But the keeper knows these mountains like her own home, like the rooms of her body. She knows where the dangers are, where the safe paths, the hidden routes. She'll go up, will kneel beside each spring, will taste the water, feel it, sense it. She shows you her equipment, quite proudly, quite lovingly. An old, yellowed notebook, worn, full of entries, handwritten, generation upon generation. A simple, elegant glass vessel to take samples, small portions of the sacred, clear water. An old, classical thermometer from the 60s, reliable, precise. She doesn't have much equipment, but she has exactly what she needs, not more, not less. The keeper works with nature's means, not against them, but with them, lovingly, respectfully, gently, like someone with their own child. She tells you about a special spring, a sacred spring, a source that's centuries old, perhaps longer, perhaps 1,000 years. It springs from a deeper ice, from eternal ice, and it always has the same temperature, constant, absolutely constant. Always the same flow rate, year after year, decade after decade. It's reliable, faithful, like the mountains themselves, like God himself. This spring is her special treasure, her most beloved spring. You ask her if she's not afraid of the mountains, of the height, of the dangers, and she laughs quietly, quite gently. Afraid? No, not really, not anymore. Respect, yes, great respect. The mountains deserve deep reverence. But fear is for people who don't understand the mountains, who go up for the first time. The keeper understands the mountains, has studied them her whole life. She knows their rules, their rhythms, their secrets. The train slows, slower, climbs around a big curve. Zermatt grows closer, ever closer, that legendary, mystical mountain village. The keeper looks out at the Matterhorn, the majestic, proud mountain, and her eyes gleam. She nods, as if speaking with the mountain, having a conversation, as if this were an old, beloved friend. She tells you about the glaciers, about their slow change, about their shrinking. She has the data collected over decades in the old notebooks. She sees that the glaciers are shrinking, that the springs are lessening, that the water quantity is decreasing, that everything is changing, faster now. It pains her to see this, it hurts her. But she's a keeper, and a keeper documents what happens, preserves the memory, the history. You notice that she cares deeply, that this isn't just work for her, no paid job. The water, the springs, the glaciers, they're her life itself. They're her family, her brothers and sisters. She's bound to them through something stronger than blood, stronger than words, that's sacred. The train brakes slowly, very gently. Zermatt. The keeper packs her things together, carefully, her notebooks, her simple, precious equipment. She'll get off here and go up to the glacier world, to the world of eternal ice. She'll spend days there, perhaps weeks, all summer. She'll visit each spring, will document, will play the keeper she is, will be, will always be. She smiles at you, a smile that's truly peaceful, fulfilled, happy. She tells you, quite seriously, that the springs are waiting for her, that the sources are waiting to be noticed, to be seen, to be cared for. It's important work that no one sees, that no one understands, that no one values. But it's important. It's sacred. The train finally stops with a last breath, with a last hiss, very gently. The keeper stands up, very slowly, very composed, very dignified, very serious, as if this were a sacred moment, a sacred hour, a sacred work. She takes her precious notebooks and her beloved equipment and goes out into the clear, cold, intoxicating, wonderful mountain air of Zermatt, into the air of the heights. You watch her as she leaves the station, going up into the mountains, sure, with strong legs, as she slowly disappears into the heights, as she grows smaller, smaller against the vast, eternal mountains. And you know, absolutely know, with your whole soul, with your whole mind, that this woman is one of the great preservers of this earth, one of the guardians of sacred water, sacred life, even though most don't see it, don't understand it, don't value it. The train doesn't continue, stays still. Zermatt is the end of the line, the destination of the journey, the boundary between below and above. But for the keeper, this isn't the end, but the beginning, the true beginning of her great, sacred work. She'll go up into the eternal world of ice and snow, into the world of springs, the sacred springs that have flowed for thousands of years, and she'll work all summer long, tirelessly, faithfully, conscientiously, without pay, without recognition, without fame, from pure, sacred love for the springs, for the glaciers, for the mountains, for this precious, sacred earth. And you feel how tiredness slowly, gently, lovingly takes hold of you, how your eyes grow heavier and heavier, how your heart beats quieter and quieter, how your whole body relaxes, how the train itself rocks you gently, soothingly. The story of this woman, this deep, sacred love for the springs, for the glaciers, for the sacred sources, for the mountains, for this earth, it has fallen into your heart, deep inside, forever. You'll fall asleep now, very soon. Sleep is already here, is already around you, is already in you. And the glacier springs will flow in your dreams, eternal, unstoppable, crystal clear, cold and pure and beautiful. And your heart will flow with them, will become one with them. And that is enough. That is more than enough. And as the train kept going through the night, ta-dum, Tadam. I noticed my thoughts slowing, the images in my head becoming softer, the edges blurring. The voices I had heard became a soft humming, a hum like from distant bees, or like an old song heard as a child and now not quite remembered. The warm air current in the compartment wrapped around me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders sank very slowly downward, how the tension of the day fell from me piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without rush, without sorrow. The train rolled gently on, and outside the world was now completely dark, only a few lights in the distance, single windows where other people were also coming to rest. I thought about how many people at this moment in the world were falling asleep, each in their bed, in their compartment, in their room, and how we were all part of one great, silent movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great, friendly animal that carried us all together, through the darkness, through time. The sun sinks over the flat Polish landscape, and the train between Gdansk and Szczecin moves slowly like a ship on still water. Through the open window, the salt air drifts in, salty and green, with a hint of seaweed and damp sand. I sit in the compartment, and beside me, in the corner, sits a woman with the color of the sea in her eyes. Her hands are weathered, brown and creased, with earth beneath the nails, and in her lap lies a small linen sack that smells faintly of iodine. She gazes out the window as if searching for something lost, something only she can see. I ask where she's from, and she answers quietly, without taking her eyes from the view. From the beach, north of Gdansk, where yesterday a great storm churned up the sea and threw everything about. She's been on the shore all night, she said, and read the amber from the seaweed the way other people read books. Each piece she found was like a word in a story the sea tells her. She opens the linen sack and shows me a piece of amber, small and translucent like old honey. Inside it is a tiny gnat trapped millions of years ago, motionless in the golden resin. She says some people want to grow rich from this work, that they sell the amber and question the beach like a businessman, but not her. For her, the gathering is a conversation. Each piece tells her something about time, about age, about what is lost and what remains. The train rocks gently, and I imagine the beach she's left behind. Gray-green water rolling against the dunes, wave foam spreading over black sand. She'd be there, kneeling, fingers moving through the seaweed like tools honed over many years. The sun rises, and she barely notices. The gathering is all that matters. The rhythm of the sea has become her rhythm. She tells me she's been doing this for 40 years, since she was a young girl. Amber was everywhere then, but now it grows harder to find. Fewer storms or fewer people with the patience to search. She says that's all right. The work isn't for the result, not for the number of pieces gathered. The work is itself the purpose. The kneeling on the shore, the hands in the water, the waiting for the next wave, the seeing and finding and knowing. Another piece of amber she shows me is large, white, and opaque like milk. She says she doesn't know what's inside it, perhaps nothing, perhaps everything. It's the mystery she loves, a piece of amber that doesn't reveal what it is preserved. She holds it to the light and it glows, but only from the outside. The inside stays dark and unknown. The landscape outside grows flatter and greener. Small villages with white churches, fields where farmers work by hand, bent like the amber gatherer on the shore. Everything in this region is marked by that patience, that willingness to settle and wait until the land or sea gives you what it will give. I think the greatest artists and craftspeople are often those who speak least, who understand the world through their fingers. She looks at me now, directly, for the first time, and her eyes are clear and old and wise. She asks if I've been to the beach, and I say no. She smiles a little. "That's all right," she says. "Not everyone has to go to the beach, but perhaps everyone must kneel somewhere and wait until they understand something that matters." Amber gathering is for her alone, but the waiting is for everyone. The sun is now very red and very low in the sky. The train keeps going, and the windows fill with red light. She slowly packs the linen sack, puts the amber back, the gnat, the white secret, everything. Her movements are unhurried, without rush, without haste. There's no hurrying for someone who has understood time. She tells me about the rain that comes after the storm, about the days when the beach is empty and the sea looks gray and angry, and how she goes anyway. In those times, you find less amber, but you find something else. You find yourself at the water's edge, small and insignificant against the vast old sea. That's not a sad thought, she says. It's relieving. When you're small, you don't have to carry so much. She says that sometimes amber takes days to dry after she takes it from the water. During those days, it's opaque, cloudy, almost gray. But when it's dry, it becomes golden again. That's like life, I think, as I listen to her. The difficult times are like the water. Everything's dark and blurred. But if you wait, if you give it time, it becomes clear again. She has a bag with her, not large, not heavy, and she says she's heading to Stettin to stay for a few weeks. She has a sister there, older than her, who also has old hands and also knows what it means to wait. They'll sit together in the garden and speak of nothing in particular, and that will be enough. That will be a piece of amber, a fragment of time they share. The train rocks, and the wheels make a regular sound, like waves striking the shore. Always the same, always the rhythm. She leans her head against the window, and her eyes grow heavier. Outside, the landscape drifts past, but she doesn't really see it anymore. Or perhaps she sees it with the eyes of someone searching for amber on the beach, someone who sees a story in each thing, who translates everything into patience. I watch her beginning to doze, and I think of the beach, the dunes, the old sea, which for millions of years has done what it has always done. It gives and it takes away, it hides and it reveals. And somewhere out there, in a bay north of Gdansk, the next storm waits, and the sand will be stirred again, and amber will be washed ashore again. Small golden stories waiting for someone with the patience to read them. I reflect on her words as the train rolls through the darkening landscape. The gathering isn't for the result, she'd said. The gathering is itself the purpose. How many people in the modern world understand that still? That the work itself is the meaning, that the doing matters more than the having. She understands it, this old woman with her weathered hands, and perhaps that's why she's so calm, so fulfilled. She has no reason to rush. She has no reason to despair. She'll go tomorrow again, and the day after, for as long as her body allows. And she'll kneel and gather, and that is enough. Her breathing grows slower, deeper, and a tiny smile rests on her face. Her hands lie relaxed in her lap, and I see how the line of years is written in them, literally written in wrinkles and spots and scars. Hands that have loved and worked, that have touched the sea thousands and thousands of times. The train rocks on into the dusk, and I lean my head against the window too and breathe in the salt air and think, this is enough. This is everything. And slowly, as the amber dried, I grow quieter. My breathing becomes shallower, and the sound of the train becomes a song, an old song without words that draws me deep into sleep, away from the beach, away from the seaweed, away from everything except the gentle, eternal rocking of the journey. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then images came behind my eyelids. No clear pictures, just colors. Soft colors, blue and gray, and a little gold from the compartment lamp. And those colors mingled into something that was no longer seeing and not yet dream. The train kept going, ta-dum, ta-dum, and each ta-dum was a little further away, as if the train wasn't quite in the same space as me anymore, as if I were already halfway elsewhere, halfway in that country where tiredness lives, where everything grows simple. You heard it for the first time as you were about to drift off, your eyelids heavy, your thoughts slowing, your breath deepening. A bell. So quiet, you almost wondered if you'd heard it at all. More of an idea than a sound, an echo of something that might have been there. Sweet, that bell was. Gentle as the whisper of an angel confiding something meant only for you. Not loud, not frightening, not like those dreadful station announcements that jolt you awake. Just there, delicate, hushed, a soft announcement of something approaching, something that called you forth without really calling, because you were still half dreaming, still in that other world where time moved like honey. It was a different conductor from the one with the 2 pocket watches. This one was young, or old, or perhaps timeless. He carried the bell. It hung on a ribbon round his neck, small and golden, with a sound like music, but without notes, without structure. This bell, he said when he saw you were aware, half awake at least, rings whenever we approach the next station. Not for everyone, mind you, only for those who are sleeping, only for those who need to hear it. He nodded to you kindly, then slipped away through the door to the next carriage. The next times it rang, you kept your eyes closed. The light outside would have hurt, the waking world too harsh. You knew something was near, felt the train slowing gently, felt a new station arriving, a new chance, a new opportunity for someone to leave or board. But you wanted to sleep still, to dream still, to remain in that lovely, suspended place between waking and sleep, that gray space where things are true because you dream them. The bell respected that, respected your choice, your tiredness, your need for rest. It wasn't like an alarm clock that drags you violently from sleep with its harsh, metallic scream. It was more of an invitation, gentle, patient, like a hand on your arm saying without words, if you're ready. If you want to wake, it seemed to say with its tone, with all its soul, you can do so without fear, without haste. But if not, if you'd rather dream on, that's more than all right. Sleep deeper, dream on. Your dreams matter, your rest matters. The station will wait, or it will go, and the train will continue, and all will be well. You began to wait for that bell the way you'd wait for a letter, a message, for someone you loved who never came. In the carriage's silence between stations, in the deep night when no one else was awake but you and the train itself, you'd listen for it, strain to hear it, stay half-conscious to catch it, to make sure it hadn't abandoned you. It always came, punctual, or perhaps punctuality was meaningless here, for there was no real time, no obligation, no schedule by the world's ordinary clocks, only the time of dreams, the time of trains, which flowed differently, more gently. Sometimes long stretches lay between the ringings, long minutes, long hours, or perhaps mere moments. You couldn't tell the difference. Sometimes very short intervals, barely time to sleep properly. Sometimes the bell rushed toward you with urgency. Sometimes it approached slowly, carefully, as though reluctant to disturb you. There was no pattern, no logic, no rule, just the bell, speaking to you, your bell, ringing for you alone. You discovered, or perhaps were shown, that the bell wasn't only about the train's stations. It was for you, for your spirit, for your soul. Each time it rang, something opened within you, a space, a window. The bell said, "One station in your life is finished, a new one comes. It's all right to leave, it's all right to stay. It's all right to understand that there is a season for every journey, that the journey itself is the meaning. The bell tolled not only for train stations, but for the stations of your life, those great moments, those difficult transitions that mark us. One night, or perhaps one dream, you couldn't tell the difference anymore. You sat with the conductor and he placed the bell in your hand. It was warm, that bell, almost alive, as though a heart beat within it. Once, he said, I shouted, "Next stop!" I had to cry it out so people would wake. They were frightened of my voice, afraid of missing their station. But then, and he gazed at the bell, I was given this. Now the passengers sleep better. They're no longer afraid. They know the bell will tell them, but gently, without fear. And if they don't wish to wake, they're not forced. You understood that this bell was a gift to all who traveled, especially to older folk like you, who'd lived long, experienced much, grown so weary, so weary. It was a bell of grace, of consideration, of gentleness, of kindness. It didn't say with a harsh voice, "You must get up, you must leave, the station is here, you're late." Instead, softly, "I'm here if you need me, when you're ready to wake. Take your time, there's no hurry anymore." A mother's bell, a bell of love, a bell that understood you were tired, that you wanted to sleep, that the world is hard and sleep is good, very necessary. This bell was your friend, your guardian, your silent companion in the dark. As the train neared the end of its journey, the bell rang more frequently, or perhaps faster, or perhaps your awareness sharpened. Maybe you simply listened better, understood each note more deeply. For the journey had become longer, more profound. Each ring grew more beautiful, more significant. A farewell, an announcement of what came next, of the inevitable. The bell rings, and you know another station comes, and another after that, and another, and another. Stations without end, rings like heartbeats, until the last station, your last station, the place where you step out, where you leave your compartment, where you return to the waking world. The train rolls on without you into the night, but the bell will always ring on for everyone who comes after, for all the travelers, all the dreamers, for all who will sleep and must wake, gentle, hushed, loving, eternal. You sleep now, deeper, softer. The bell surrounds you. It's your bell, ringing for you alone, drawing you into dreams without end. Dreams that continue when you wake, dreams that follow you into life. The last bell your ear hears tonight, before deep sleep takes you, before you cross into that other world, is sweet, so sweet, is true, is real, is everything you need to slip into peace, into that depth where stations need no names, where journeys end, where all things end. But you'll dream. You know somewhere you'll dream that it continues, always further, forever and ever, always gentle, always loving, accompanied by the bell, by this eternal bell that rings softly before every station, that whispers, that sings, that carries you on. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people are sleeping in their beds, in their houses, and the moon watches over them, watches over us, and everything is as it should be. The fields in their places, the forests in their places, the rivers in their places. And I'm in mine, here in this carriage, in this warm cradle of wood and cloth and metal that carries me where I need to go, asking nothing but that I trust and rest. It wasn't your window at first. You caught sight of it out of the corner of your eye. That's the thing about windows on a night train, isn't it? This one glowed differently from the rest, as if lit from within. Where all the others showed autumn, dark, wet, melancholy, leaves falling, trees undressing themselves, This one showed winter, proper winter, with snow. White snow so pure it was nearly blinding. Snow that seemed to gleam from the inside, as though it held some sort of secret. You got up and looked closer. It wasn't really cold, you see. The cold was more of an idea, the sort of cold you feel in dreams that doesn't hurt, merely hovers as a sensation, an echo. The snow landscape beyond that glass was beautiful, mind you. Hills of white, forests of white, a whole winter that perhaps existed or perhaps never did, or perhaps was still waiting to come in some future you couldn't see. But it wasn't the winter you knew. It was winter as it might appear in a dream, more radiant, brighter, without the bite that wounds. A man stood beside you. Whether he'd been there all along or simply appeared out of the snow, you couldn't quite say. He was old, much older, with hair as white as the snow beyond the glass, so white you couldn't properly tell where his head ended and the winter began. "That's another winter," he said quietly, as though the winter itself shouldn't hear. "One that never came to pass. A winter that exists only in the dreams of people, in their longings, in their memories of a winter wonder that never arrived, or that they desperately wished had arrived in this life, or perhaps the next." He gestured toward the landscape with a hand that seemed almost translucent, like ice. "Do you see the lights there? Those little golden lights between the trees, like eyes awake in the dark?" You saw them now, scattered throughout the white forest, in windows, on distant houses, like stars that had fallen into the snow, like dreams made somehow solid. Those are people's dreams. Dreams of Christmas, of love, of snowfall and warmth, of a magic that doesn't exist in the world, but is wished so fiercely that it becomes real here, in this window, in this train, in this night, where dreams matter more than truth. "What winter is this?" you asked him. He smiled, sadly and beautifully both. "The winter of 1978, he said. "A winter that should have come but didn't. There should have been snow, so much snow. The season should have been long and beautiful, like something out of an old story. But it never came. It was an ordinary winter, gray and wet and disappointing. The people who'd waited for snow, they dreamed this winter through the night, the one that wasn't, the one they needed. And here, in this train, we can see it, this dream winter. It's real, every bit as real as the winter outside, or perhaps more so." You weren't sure you understood, or perhaps you understood more than you realized you could. The old man pointed to a house in the distance, small, glowing, its windows luminous like candles, like hope, like a heartbeat in the dark. "There's a family there," he said, "in my memory, or perhaps my dream, or perhaps in someone else's memory, in a dream someone passed on to me. They're waiting for snow. The children, impatient, their noses pressed against the glass. The mother, waiting quietly, hope in her eyes. The father, too, though he wouldn't show it. All of them looking out, dreaming of the winter that should have come, but didn't. And here, in our window tonight, they see it at last. The snow, exactly as they dreamed it. Not in reality, mind you, but in a truth that matters more than reality, a deeper truth, the truth of dreams. You watched this other winter for a long time. The longer you looked, the more detail emerged. Life began to populate that snow. Children making snow angels, pressing their bodies into the white, forming shapes they couldn't make in their own world. An old man, gray and tired, building a snowman with all his soul, something he'd wanted to do as a boy but could never, because there was no snow. But here, in this dream winter, he could at last, with his aged hands, with what strength remained to him. woman standing alone at the edge of winter, arms spread like a bird wanting to fly, savoring the snow, savoring the cold that here wasn't pain, but beauty, blessing. All these people who didn't exist anywhere else, and yet in this window they were entirely real. So real your heart wanted to beat with theirs because they lived in the dreams of the world, in its unspoken longings, in the nights when people lay awake and alone. The old man beside you grew tired. His body seemed to settle like snow gathering, and you sat with him, and the bench beneath you was warm despite the winter surrounding it. "There are many windows like this one," he said, more to himself than to you, to the night, to the train itself. Not just winter. Windows showing summers that never came, hot, golden summers where everything bloomed. Autumns too beautiful to be real, full of colors that never existed. Springs that bloom only in people's hearts. Springs when love returns and everything renews. Each window is a dream that became too real to die, too precious to simply vanish. Each is a moment someone needed but never received, never in the waking world. So the dream had to create it, here on a train in the night, for all those who suffer, who wait, who dream. Now you feel the train carrying you on, away from this window, but not really away, because the window is everywhere now. It's in your heart. It's in your dreams. It will always be with you wherever you go. This winter that never came, that never existed except in hopes and wishes. It's real now because you've seen it, because you believe in it, because you've become part of it. There will be other windows to see, other seasons, other dreams, other winters that didn't arrive, summers that were too short, springs that didn't bloom. But this winter will always be yours. This wonder winter, this dream winter that exists in a train in the night, that stays forever young, forever magical, forever full of snow and hope. You rest your head against the glass and keep watching the snow, the lights, the people living in this dream winter. And you dream with them, dreaming their dream. And for one long, gentle moment, everything you need is there, in this window, in this other winter, in this train rolling through the darkness, carrying all the dreams that are too real to die. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people are sleeping in their beds, in their houses, and the moon watches over them, watches over us, and everything is as it should be. The fields in their places, the forests in their places, the rivers in their places. And I'm in mine, here in this carriage, in this warm cradle of wood and cloth and metal that carries me where I need to go, asking nothing but that I trust and rest. The train rolled on gently, and outside, the world had grown quite dark, just a few lights in the distance, solitary windows where others, too, were settling into sleep. I thought about all the people in the world at that moment, each in their bed, their compartment, their room, and how we were all part of one great, quiet movement, a movement towards sleep. The rhythm of wheels on the rails, clack, 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 was like the breathing of some large, friendly creature carrying us all together through the dark, through time itself. You stood up to stretch your legs, to get your blood moving again, and somehow, without really knowing how, a door opened to a carriage you hadn't noticed before. Or perhaps you'd overlooked it because it didn't feel like it existed, as if it belonged only to dreams. It was a completely different carriage, filled with paper, permeated with the smell of old paper, of ink, of memory. Not everywhere, but on a long bench running through the entire space, several meters long, lay pages, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, all white and clean, unwritten and yet waiting. And beside them lay feathers, quill pens, some of gold, some of silver, some of things you couldn't name. Some feathers were writing just now, without a hand, without anyone holding them, without a body, without force. They moved across the paper as if of their own volition, delicate, precise, like a bird dreaming its flying, carrying flight into the paper. You step closer, and now you can see what they're writing. They're letters, not finished, not signed, but very real. Dear Maria, I should have told you that, writes one feather in a trembling old hand. Another writes, I miss the way you laughed. A third, I'm sorry I didn't call before it was too late. The feathers all write at the same time, but each writes its own letter, its own story, its own regret, or its own love. There was a woman sitting in the corner, almost invisible, almost like part of the paper itself, as if she were made of sheets of words that were never spoken. She was old, or perhaps only tired from many years, tired of many stories. And she wore glasses on her nose through which she watched the feathers, with great attention, as if observing them, guiding them gently, with her gaze alone, with her quiet love. These are the letters, she said to you, though you didn't ask, though you only looked, silent, confused, and fascinated, that were never written. The letters that lived in people's hearts, lived painfully, but the words were too big, too heavy, too true to write down. The things you should have said, above all before you died, before you moved away, before the chance was gone, before the sun set on this story. You asked her who guides the feathers, and the woman smiled, a sad, understanding smile. Grief, she said. Grief writes. Regret writes. Love that wasn't spoken writes too. They all need a place to express themselves, a place where the words can go without hurting anyone, without coming too late. Here, in this carriage, the letters can finally be written, at last, at last. The woman pointed to another corner where the finished letters lay stacked like a tower of words. When they're done, they disappear, not into nothingness, but into the dreams of the people who should have read them but didn't. Those dreams are real, you understand, as real as this train. And in those dreams, there, the words can finally land. You watched the feathers for a long time, and with each minute that passed, it became clearer to you what was happening here. What a sacred place this was. There was one that wrote the same thing over and over again. I love you. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. Again and again, page after page, the same words, but each time different, each time more profound, as if love couldn't tell itself enough. Another wrote in trembling handwriting, The tree you planted has grown large. It bears fruit, red fruit, beautiful, and I eat it and think of you. I think of you when I sit beneath it, and I wish you knew that you could see how large it became from just a tiny seed. A third wrote in broad, strong script, Life was beautiful with you, really beautiful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Though I never told you, though I was too proud, too blind, too stupid. Thank you for existing. Thank you for touching my life. The pain and the love flowed from these feathers like blood from a wound that can finally heal, that can finally say what its heart contained. You sat down beside the old woman, and without words, only with glances, you asked if it's too late, if you can still write your letters. The woman looked at you, and her eyes were full of compassion and wisdom. In the train, she said, it's never too late. Time is different here. You can write all the letters you needed to write. You can say what you should have said. She pointed to a blank page, to a place where a feather could wait, just for you. Would you like to write one? She asked. You didn't know to whom you would write or what you would write, but somehow you did know. There was someone, a person, a voice you hadn't heard in a long time. There were words you could never find to speak them. You sit down, at the bench, at the blank paper, And the feather comes to you all by itself, as if it already knows you, as if it's been waiting your whole life for you. It settles on the paper gently, like a feather falling, and you open your mouth, at first no sound. Then the words come, words you didn't expect, didn't know were there. You didn't know you had so much to say, that there was so much love in you, so much sorrow, so much regret, so much that hadn't been spoken. The feather writes faster, faster, with a speed your thoughts can't follow, and the words aren't always quite right, not always grammatically correct, not always beautiful. But they're true, so true that the paper begins to glow, glowing like gold, as if your heart were flowing directly onto the page, as if your life were revealing itself in ink. You write of love, of the love you never spoke, of forgiveness, of the things that weren't said, of all the things you never spoke because you were afraid, because time always seemed to run too fast, because life swept you along like a current, and you had no strength left to speak. When the feather finally stops, when you've written everything there is to write, you feel empty and full at the same time. The woman takes your letter and places it on the pile with the others. "A beautiful letter," she says, though she hasn't read it, though your handwriting was wild, chaotic sometimes. "That will be a beautiful dream message. Someone will dream it tonight without understanding it's a letter, but the love in it they will feel. They'll wake up and gently remember that they were loved, that everything is all right." You sit there, at the edge of waking and dreaming, at that threshold between two worlds, and you hear the feathers as they still write, as they still speak, quietly, tirelessly, for all who can no longer speak, for all who lived and died without finding their words, without telling their stories. The carriage is a graveyard of unspoken love, a sanctuary for all who didn't have enough time, enough courage, enough luck. But it's also a place of healing, as you now know more deeply, a place where everything that went unsaid can finally be spoken, where every word lands and counts, where love that wasn't spoken finally finds a home. The feathers keep writing, and tomorrow they'll write new letters from new people, new words, new dreams, and this carriage will keep growing fuller, fuller with all that we cannot say, that we can feel, that tears us apart and heals us. You first noticed him when the conductor pulled out the first pocket watch. It was golden, old, with a matte gold cover on which was an engraving, an inscription you couldn't quite read because the letters were too fine, too old. He held it to his ear, nodded, as if it were telling him something important that only he could hear, and then put it back in his waistcoat pocket. Seconds later, he pulled out a second watch. This one was silver and glowed in the light of the carriage lamps, like a moon rising in his hand. The conductor was older, perhaps about your age, or perhaps older, or perhaps younger. Age lost its meaning here, with the appearance of a man who'd worked long nights, many years, perhaps decades, perhaps a lifetime, who'd punched many tickets, thousands, perhaps millions, each with a hole that had held a life together, that had anchored a person in time, who'd driven many trains on routes others didn't know, on rails that had no names on timetables, on routes only he knew. His uniform was dark blue, cleaner than necessary, maintained like the sanctuary of a temple guardian, with little brass buttons that gleamed like eyes, and he carried these two watches like two hearts in his chest, as if each beat in a different rhythm, in a different tempo, in a different life he lived simultaneously. You saw him several times on this journey. Each time he walked through the carriage, his cap on, his stamp ready, his movements like a ritual. He pulled out a different watch, nodded to it, as if having a conversation with himself, with the other watch, put it away, pulled out the other. The golden, then the silver, then the golden again. Always in this slow, deliberate tempo, like a dance only he danced. an old waltz he performed to an audience of one. At some point, it was after the 3rd or 4th station, or perhaps the 10th, perhaps the 100th, the stations all blurred into each other like colors in water, you dared to ask. The conductor sat beside you for the first time since you'd boarded, and he looked out the window with the expression of a man waiting for something, who'd waited his whole life, and who now finally had patience. "Why 2 watches?" you asked quietly, and your voice sounded strange in this carriage, too direct, too real, too awake. The conductor turned slowly. It was as if he were waking from a long dream, and his face was kind, full of understanding, full of patience, as if he'd heard this question 1,000 times from 1,000 different travelers over the years. "One is for outside," he said, and he pulled out the golden watch and held it for you to see, slowly, as if showing something sacred. The time there, in the cities, in the houses, everywhere people live, houses with windows, streets with names, people who know it's 10 o'clock or 5:30 or midnight, who divide their day into hours, minutes, seconds, who don't want to waste. The time that counts, that moves, that goes forward, fast, ever faster, ever hungrier. The watch ticked in a normal, regular rhythm, fast and reliable, impatient, harsh as rain. Then he pulled out the silver watch, and you saw how his face changed, became softer. "And this," he said, "is for here, in the train. The time of traveling, the time of dreams. The time that belongs to people, not to clocks. The time that's slow." This watch ticked much more slowly, lazily, like a heart that takes its time, that holds each beat precious. In the train, time flows differently. One moment lasts an eternity when you look out the window and see how the landscape changes. One night is a whole world full of dreams and memories. One journey is a whole life. You didn't quite understand, or perhaps you did, but the words were too big, too vast to really grasp, to hold. But when the conductor held both watches, one in each hand, and they ticked beside each other, it became clear, brightened like morning light. They were synchronized, but only if you heard both, only if you made the effort to listen, really listen, with your heart. One was fast, impatient, nervous, like a bird. The other slow, merciful, wise, like an old tree. Together they made a rhythm, a waltz, a kind of music that perhaps never existed before this conductor was born. The conductor looked at you, and his eyes were very old, older than his face, perhaps older than the train itself. "If you only have one," he said slowly, as if each word cost him, as if he were drawing it from his memory. "The fast one, the one from outside. Then you're always running, your whole life long, without ever arriving. You're always late, always behind schedule. Your heart pumps too fast, too hard. Your thoughts chase each other. You always want to be at your destination before you've even started. You always want more, always further. And in the end, you're dead, and you haven't lived. But in the train, in this special time, in this sacred time, here between the stations, you have to hear the other watch, the one that whispers, not shouts. The watch that says arriving doesn't matter, not really. That the traveling itself is the journey. That life happens between places, not at them. That the hours here don't need a clock. They only need silence and darkness and patience and the sound of the rails, the gentle music that holds everything. He put the 2 watches away as if hiding treasure, and the music was gone again, hidden in his pocket. But you could still hear it, because it wasn't really gone, in the darkness, in the silence, always, in the gentle tempo of the wheels that rolled on endlessly, like the heartbeat of the world. After this conversation, you noticed much more, as if the train were revealing itself before you. You saw how the conductor pulled the golden watch at each station. There, time was real, concrete, the time of platforms, of travelers who, like insects, climbed in and out, who hastily returned to their lives. and how he then, back in the train, barely had the doors closed, took the silver watch to remind you that the journey wasn't over, that there was still time, that the most important thing was still to come. He was a kind man, this conductor, a man who'd understood that 2 times were needed to live a whole life, that you had to be fast and slow, that you had to be awake and dreaming. Some people live their whole lives by only one clock, always hurried, always on the way, always in a rush, and they forget life itself. But he knew better. He'd learned over the years. You're feeling tired now, and the journey grows ever gentler, like a hand touching your face. The conductor walks through the carriage again, pulls the silver watch, and it whispers to you that it's all right to sleep, that time flows differently here, that you can't be late, that you'll never be late. The golden watch sleeps in his pocket, rests for the next station, and the silver ticks on, ever slower, until it's almost inaudible. Only a feeling, a heartbeat, your own heartbeat, mingled with the music of the train. The train hums beneath you, a deep, soothing hum, and the rails sing in 2 rhythms, layered, mixed, like 2 watches making a lullaby together, that old sleep song of travelers that carries you gently away towards a place where time no longer matters, where only the journey counts, where you can arrive without ever having to leave. The train went through a tunnel, and for a brief moment it was completely dark outside. Just the roar, just the echo of the wheels on the tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were outside again, and the night took us back again, like a mother taking her child back into her arms after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnels and night, and then tunnels again, and then night again, and on and on, and on and on. And eventually you don't notice anymore what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so close you can smell it. It was one of those evenings when you didn't really know how you'd ended up at the station. Perhaps you'd been reading a newspaper, perhaps watching a window, and then the houses had somehow drifted past you, slowly at first, then faster, ever faster, until the places were only colors. The platform was empty, very empty, and the board showed no names of places you recognized. Instead, there were only signs that meant something, but not what appeared on normal tickets, no abbreviations you could learn. A train stood there, just like that, as if it had always been there, waiting for you specifically, and you got on, without really thinking whether it was right. It felt right, and that was always enough for you then, that feeling. That justified everything. The strange thing wasn't immediately obvious. The carriage looked like any other. The same blue seats with fine embroidery in the corners, so fine you'd have needed patience to look at them. The same little net pockets above the headrests where you could stick magazines you forgot to read. The same grips of cold metal that was somehow still warm, as if someone had only just let go, as if the hand were still there. But when the train started moving, you noticed that the windows didn't face forward, but backward, into a landscape you might have seen before, sometime in the long life you'd lived, but couldn't name, not really. It was like a memory of something you'd forgotten to forget, a layer beneath the everyday that you hadn't noticed for years, but had always been there, waiting, still. There was a station in twilight, with a bench where someone could have sat, or perhaps someone had just stood up at the moment before you saw it. There were houses with lit windows from which music came that had been too loud or too soft, you didn't remember which, the years have blurred such differences. There were roads you'd walked on when you were still different, perhaps younger or just lighter, before the years added their soft, inevitable weight. The train stopped at each of these places. No place the timetables knew, none you could have found on a map, even if you'd tried. The doors opened with a gentle breath, like the exhaling of a great animal. but you didn't get out. Not here. This wasn't the right moment for that, and you knew it, though you didn't know how you knew. Beside you sat a woman you didn't notice until later, or perhaps she was always there and you'd simply overlooked her. She read a newspaper dated from last year or the year before. The time on its pages wasn't quite the same as outside. She didn't look at you, but she smiled sometimes, as if she knew exactly that you were confused, that you were asking what was happening here, and it was okay, all of that. "Those are just the stations," she said, without lifting her gaze from the page, her voice like smoke, like something just dissolving. "That people have forgotten. The stops where people got out and never came back. The places that fell out of the world when someone stopped remembering them." You wanted to ask how you could forget a station, how you could simply lose an entire place from your memory, how that was possible. But the words weren't quite tangible. They were there somewhere, but they didn't want to come into your mouth. Instead, you just nodded and looked out into the dark, where the trees moved like breath. There was a moment. It could have been hours later or minutes. Time was foreign and unreliable here. It flowed differently than outside, faster sometimes, sometimes not at all. When you stood up and went to the window, your legs were stiff, as if a long time had passed, though you hadn't slept, or perhaps you had without noticing. Outside, the forest looked different, denser perhaps, or just in a light that never existed where you lived, a moonlight that was older, more ancient. The trees were silver, or perhaps only because the moon made them so, with its cold, friendly fingers that gently touched everything. And the train stopped at a station whose name you couldn't read on the sign, the letters blurred when you looked at them, but whose feeling you knew, very deep somewhere in you, in a place where feelings gather like rainwater in a well. It was the place where you'd got out back then without noticing, a station in your life you'd long left behind, without saying goodbye properly, without turning back. A chance you'd missed, one of many. A person you hadn't thought of anymore, though you really should have, to whom you could still be grateful if it weren't too late. The station was beautiful, in a quiet, sad way, like all beautiful things that are forgotten, like all moments that are simply gone. The doors opened once more. The conductor, who suddenly appeared, or had perhaps been there all along and you'd simply overlooked him, wore a uniform that looked gray and timeless, like a uniform from an older film. He nodded as if he understood that this journey didn't frighten you, but calmed you, that it gave you exactly what you didn't know you needed. His eyes were kind, warm, and he had the appearance of a man who had run many such trains, who knew many such forgotten travelers, whose names he couldn't and wouldn't speak. "The next stop is the last," he said quietly. His voice was like the ticking of a clock that ticks very slowly. "The one you want to remember, the place you want to go." The train jerked, began moving again, and the landscape outside grew softer, blurred, like a dream saying goodbye by turning into something more beautiful, into something that can last longer. You sink back into your seat. The woman beside you was gone, or perhaps was never really there, only a memory of a conversation you had with yourself in the years between then and now, in all the time that flowed between like a river you couldn't see. The train is now very quiet, and the rails beneath you sing a song that needs no words, a melody of iron and time, of the voices of all who've traveled here, all the travelers, all the forgotten ones. Each station you stop at is a moment you can release, a name, a place, a person who's now elsewhere, in another version of this story, in another carriage perhaps, in another life. It feels good, finally giving these things space in the dark, without holding them, without forcing them to stay here where they no longer belong. The letting go is gentle here, light as sleep, like the breathing of a child dreaming of a place it doesn't yet know. The next station comes closer, ever closer, like a dream ending. You don't recognize it, but you will get out, and it will be right, even though you don't really know why. The train slows, and the music of the rails grows gentler, a lullaby for all who've forgotten that it's all right to go, that going is sometimes the only thing that remains. The windows show a place that feels like home to you, or perhaps just the thought of home, the feeling of arriving after a long journey. The conductor is already turned towards the door, ready for the next stop, the next forgotten traveler. The night outside is warm despite its darkness, and it waits patiently for you, like a mother who never really left you. I met the Lantern-Mender on a night train from Salzburg to Munich, on an evening when the mist was so thick the city had vanished as though someone had rubbed it out. Only the lights remained, the lanterns on the bridges, the shop windows on the Getreidegasse, the lamps in the alleyways of the old town, all wrapped in a soft, blurred gold, as though the whole city were burning underwater. He was a small, narrow man in his early 80s, with hands so fine and so clever, they reminded you of a watchmaker's, only rougher, from working with glass and putty and sharp-edged tools. His face was kind and wrinkled, and had the expression of someone who'd looked at the world through glass, through many glasses, and in doing so had seen something others missed. On his lapel, he wore a small brooch that looked like a tiny lantern, in silver, with a small glass window that shimmered in the light of the compartment. I admired the brooch and asked what he did for a living, and he smiled, a quiet, contented smile, and said, "Lantern-Mender." Hardly anyone knows that word anymore. I repaired lanterns, street lanterns, church lanterns, house lanterns, anything with glass and light and that could break. For 40 years. Installing glass, applying putty, adjusting frames, removing soot. Small work, quiet work. The work nobody sees, but everyone needs. He told me about his workshop. A small room in the cellar of an old house in the Salzburg Old Town, he said. Low ceiling, a window that looked onto a wall, a table full of glass shards and tools. Nothing special. Nothing to impress the tourists who stroll down the Getreidegasse and look up and admire the signs and photograph the lanterns, without knowing that someone has cared for each single one, cleaned every pane, filled every crack with putty, painted every frame. Do you know how many lanterns hang in the Salzburg Old Town? He asked. I shook my head. 234, he said. I know each one. Each has its own character, its own quirks, its own weaknesses. Number 17 on the Getreidegasse, that one has a crack in the left pane that keeps coming back, no matter how many times I putty it, because the frame warps in winter. Number 48 on Residence Square, that one has a pane that's thicker than the others, because I once had to replace it with a piece of old window glass, and ever since, it throws a different light, softer, warmer, and sometimes I think it shines more beautifully than all the others, just because it's not perfect. He told me how he works. Glass, he said, is a strange material. It's solid but fragile. It's transparent, but it changes the light that passes through it. It's old, sometimes centuries old, yet it looks new. When I remove an old pane, one that might have sat in this lantern for 200 years, I hold it up to the light, and I see the waves in it, the small irregularities, the bubbles that old glass has because it was made by hand, not by a machine. And the light falling through that glass is different. It's softer, warmer, more alive than light through modern glass. It dances a bit. It breathes. I asked him what kept him doing this work for so long. 40 years, a job nobody sees. And he thought for a while and said, "Even the smallest thing deserves care." That's my faith. My only faith, you might say. People think it's the big things that matter. The big projects, the big decisions, the big moments. But I believe it's the small things that matter. The pain I fit into a lantern that nobody notices. The putty I apply cleanly, even though no one will see it. The care I put into something so small and so insignificant that most people pass by without noticing it. Because these small things, he said, that's what makes the world, not the big ones. A light that falls through a clean pane and lights up a dark alley. That's not much. But for the person who walks through that alley in the evening, alone in the mist, for them it's everything. For them it's the difference between darkness and light, between fear and safety, between being alone and not being alone. And if I've managed that, with a pane of glass and a lump of putty, then my day wasn't wasted. Then my whole life wasn't wasted. He stepped out in Munich into the damp November night, and I thought for a long time about his words. 234 lanterns, each one cared for, each pane cleaned, each crack filled with putty, by a small, quiet man whom nobody knows and who makes the whole old town shine. Even the smallest thing deserves care. I carry that sentence with me in moments when I think what I do is too small to matter. Then I remember the Lantern-Mender, his fine hands, the pane that wasn't perfect and for that reason shone more beautifully than all the others. The train travels on, and out in the mist the lanterns shine, one after the other, each one cared for, each one important. And the rattle is like the tapping of a small hammer setting glass into a frame, quietly, carefully. And my eyes grow heavy, and the light in my compartment grows softer, warmer, like light through old glass. And I let myself fall into the warmth, into the care of the night, which holds even the smallest thing and forgets nothing. The train runs from Chur to St. Moritz, climbing up into the mountains, and you sitting by the window. It's May, late May, and the Engadine Mountains are green and snow-white at once, a contrast that soothes you. The train climbs slowly, huffs a bit, struggles against the slope, and with every curve it grows colder, higher, wilder. The air grows thinner. You notice how your thoughts slow, grow sluggish, how the altitude grasps you even in your dreams, draws you into a different rhythm. Beside you sits a woman, perhaps 40, perhaps older, with the strong, capable hands of a true craftswoman. She's a dairywoman, an Alp cheesemaker, a master of cheese, and May means for her that the first great work of the year begins. The spring cows come to the Alp, and she must prepare the dairies, prepare everything with great care. The great copper kettles must be cleaned thoroughly, the tools must be checked, sharp and clean tools, and the recipes, the old recipes, must be present in the mind, ready. She tells you about her work, calmly, without hurry, with a voice that speaks of decades of practice, of devotion. Cheesemaking is an ancient art, one of the oldest arts, and there's no substitute for experience and craft, no recipe from a book that could replace it. She will take milk from the fresh morning's work and pour it very carefully into the great copper kettles, warm milk. She will add the ferment, the essential ferment, will watch the temperature with great precision, will feel with her hands, with her body when the time is right, when the curd has the right consistency. Every year she performs the same ritual, the same movements, but it's never really the same. The milk is different every year, depending on the weather, on the special grass the cows eat, on the season. The dairywoman knows this, has learned it over many years, and she adapts her techniques, subtly, almost imperceptibly. She has learned to understand the language of milk, to speak the language of cheese, to speak the language of time. You imagine what it will be like on the Alp during these summer days. Early mornings, when the cows are milked, still in darkness, when the milk is still warm, steaming. The scent of the dairies, that specific, unforgettable scent of fresh milk and fermentation, of life and transformation. The dairywoman will stand there, her hands immersed in the hot kettles, her whole attention focused on the work, completely present. She'll make cheese every day, all summer long, methodically, lovingly, with great respect for the material. She shows you photographs of her cheese from last year, old photos. They're really beautiful, these cheeses, golden brown, with fine patterns on the crust, with the patina of time. Some are small and round for the family, some are large and heavy for market, for export. Each cheese bears a mark, the name of the Alp and the year. They're truly works of art, little works of art made of milk and time and centuries-old artisanal skill. The dairywoman tells you about the traditions, the old traditions. Engadine cheeses have a long, proud history, centuries old, some say older still. They exist in different sizes and ages, different variations for different seasons. Some are aged a few weeks, some months, some years. The dairywoman knows all these variations well, knows them from experience, and she's careful, very careful, that each cheese is made at the right time, that there's no rushing. You ask her whether the work isn't exhausting, whether the long days on the Alp don't tire her, and she laughs quietly, very quietly. Of course it's exhausting, yes. The days are long, sometimes 12, 14 hours. The work is physically hard, demands your strength. But it's also fulfilling in a way that not many jobs offer, that not many kinds of work provide. She creates something real, something lasting, something substantial, something that nourishes people, delights them, brings them joy. The train rounds a great curve, and suddenly you see the Alp high in the mountains, green and large, with a small old hut in the middle. It's not this dairywoman's Alp, but it's similar, very similar. You can easily imagine the cows grazing there, the milk flowing fresh into the dairies, the dairywoman moving her hands in the old, proven way, movements that have been the same for hundreds of years. The dairywoman shows you her work gloves, old, weathered, worn, full of stains from years of use. They're not beautiful, but they're precious, valuable, almost sacred. They're the tools of her craft, the extension of her hands, and they have stories to tell, many stories. These gloves have made hundreds of cheeses, have processed thousands of liters of milk, have dipped themselves thousands of times in hot water. She tells you about a special cheese, a legendary one that aged for 10 years, 10 whole years. It's now become so hard and dense you have to grate it with great effort and strength, but its taste is unmatched, incomparable. For pasta dishes, for risotto, for all sorts of things, but it tastes incredible, rich, intense, full of complex flavors, full of history, full of years, full of time. A cheese that took an entire decade to become who it is, to become perfect and complete, to mature. The train slowly brakes, very gently, slower and slower, and you feel the journey is ending. This ride is finished. Saint Moritz comes closer and closer, the final stop, the boundary between train and Alp. The dairywoman gathers her things very carefully, with great respect for her work. Her bag with her important notes, her old, beloved work gloves that she takes everywhere, fortunately. She'll get out here and then go up to the Alp, where the cows are already arriving, impatient, where the work waits, where everything begins. She'll fill the great copper kettles with warm, fresh milk, will make cheese all summer long, week by week, will be part of a tradition thousands of years old, older than written history, older than memory. She smiles at you, a smile that's quiet, fulfilled, satisfied. She knows what she does is important, that it's valuable, that it counts. She knows that in a couple of months her cheese will be on the markets, on the tables of people who have no idea how much work and devotion is behind it, how much knowledge. The train finally stops with one last hiss of the brakes. The dairywoman stands up, very slowly, very dignified, very thoughtfully, as if this were a sacred moment. She takes her things, her bag with her notes, her old work gloves, and goes out into the clear, cool, intoxicating Engadine air. You watch her go from the station up to the Alp, how she climbs the mountains, how she vanishes into the heights, and you know exactly that this woman is one of the most important people of that region, even if most don't understand it, even if she's not visible, even if she'll never be famous. The train starts up again, slowly pulls out of Saint Moritz. The rails sing again, and then you lean back, very tired now, very exhausted from all these encounters, all these stories. The Engadine Mountains are still there, still green and white, full of life, full of possibilities, full of secrets. And somewhere up there, in an old dairy made of dark wood, the dairywoman will dip her strong, knowing hands into the warm, steaming milk and craft new cheeses, new works of art made of milk and time and boundless knowledge. Make new history, page by page, cheese by cheese. And that's beautiful. That's important. That's good. That's right. And as the train traveled on through the night, ta-dum, ta-dum, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a humming like distant bees, or like an old song you heard as a child and can't quite remember now. The warm air in the compartment wrapped itself round me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders slowly sank down, how the day's tension fell away from me piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without hurry, without sorrow. And the landscape outside grew softer. The outlines of trees dissolved. The fields became dark surfaces over which the moon sometimes cast its pale light. I felt how my breathing slowed, how my heart slowed, how the whole body let itself sink down into the warm embrace of the seat, into the warm embrace of this train that carried me without my having to do anything for it. That was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried without effort, simply to trust that the wheels roll on, that the rails lead on, that the morning would come somehow. The train runs from Zell am See to Lienz, and you're sitting by the window, slowly waking up. It's May, late May, and the sun shines golden on the green meadows, the snow-capped peaks. The Grossglockner is your mental destination, not the train, but your thoughts. You notice how your eyelids grow heavier, how the movement of the train slowly, steadily draws you into a state between waking and dreaming, a state where anything is possible. Beside you sits a woman, perhaps 50, perhaps older, with sharp, observant eyes that miss nothing. She wears a magnifying glass on a fine cord round her neck, a working lens worn from years of use. In her rucksack are field cloths, thick notebooks with handwritten entries, camera equipment, old cameras. She's a botanist, an alpine flower botanist, and May is her most important time of year, the season she works toward all year long. The Großglockner calls to her. The flowers call. The first gentians, the first enzians, they call loud. They want to be catalogued, collected, loved. You ask her what it's about, and she tells you about her work, calmly, without hurry, like someone with a deep passion, a calling. She catalogues the alpine flowers, documents where they bloom, at exactly what altitude, when they bloom, how long the flowering lasts, how the flower shape changes over the days. She's already written big, beautiful books, established collections, but the work is never finished, will never be finished. Every year there's something new to discover. Every year the flowers bloom in different rhythms depending on winter, on weather. She shows you her photographs from the past years, old photographs, carefully maintained. Gentians in soft blue, true enzians in deep violet, tiny white alpine flowers, Edelweiss with its silver leaves, alpine roses in soft pink. Every flower is a work of art, of nature, a masterpiece, and the botanist doesn't just see the shape, the color, but the whole story trapped in the flower. She tells of the exact altitude where the flowers grow, of the soil, rocky or rich with humus, of water, of light that in these heights is harsh and bright. You imagine how tomorrow morning, very early, she'll go up to the Großglockner, to the flowers. The paths are difficult, rocky. The altitude is demanding. The air will be thin. But the botanist doesn't care, was never stopped by that. She'll go up because the flowers are waiting there, waiting for her, because no one else sees them as she does. She'll fall, perhaps. We'll slip on damp stone. We'll sweat. We'll have to breathe in the thin air. We'll gasp for breath. But she'll do it because the flowers deserve to be seen, catalogued, documented in all their beauty. She tells you of a special flower, a rare gentian species she discovered 2 years ago on this same route. She took many photographs from different angles, wrote down measurements, detailed notes. She even carefully took a small sample, pressed it, preserved it for posterity. This gentian species is endemic to the Großglockner area, and no one had catalogued it there, knew of it. Now it's part of science, part of the documentation of nature, immortalized by the botanist. The air smells of snow and flowers. Yes, it's really possible it smells that way. This scent is real. May in the Alps has a scent that's neither summer nor spring, but both at once, a mixture of melt water and growing flowers. The botanist sits beside you and breathes deeply, slowly, luxuriously, and you see how she closes her eyes, how she savors this moment intensely. This moment just before her great work, just before the climb. She tells you her exact plans for the next weeks in great detail, like a plan worked out long ago. She'll go up several times, will observe the flowers at different stages of bloom, will note how they change. She'll make measurements, scientific measurements, of temperature, humidity, the soil's pH. She'll create a precise scientific documentation that will help other botanists better understand nature. But in this is also love, real, deep love. When you listen to her, you feel how much she loves the flowers, how much this work fills her heart. The train travels through a long valley, and the mountains grow larger, closer, more imposing. The Großglockner isn't visible yet, is still hidden behind other mountains. but you feel its presence, its power, its call. Austria's highest mountain, majestic, proud, ruling. And on its slopes the flowers bloom, modest, small, tiny almost, but incredibly persistent, incredibly beautiful. They grow in the cold, in thinner air, on soil too hard for most plants, too stony, too few nutrients. The botanist shows you a thick notebook, actually a book she's writing, working on, year by year. It's not finished yet, probably never will be completely. But the chapters about the Großglockner are well advanced, nearly complete. She's made detailed drawings, glued in photographs, written precise descriptions. Every flower has its own chapter with scientific names, with local traditional names, with little stories. It's a book written purely from love, page by page. You imagine what it will be like when she goes up tomorrow and finds her flowers. How she'll kneel beside each flower respectfully. How she'll observe it long, patiently. How she'll use her magnifying glass to see the fine details, every vein on the leaf, every stamen. How she makes her photographs, many photographs, from every possible angle, with different lighting to capture the beauty. How she notes, documents, preserves for posterity, for science. The train slowly brakes, very gently. Lienz comes closer and closer. The valley grows wider. The botanist gathers her bags carefully, very respectfully, with her scientific equipment. She'll get out soon, and then she'll go up to the Großglockner, up to her flowers. She'll be there a week, perhaps, maybe 2, sometimes longer. She'll go up every day, early morning, will observe every flower, will document, note. She smiles at you, a smile full of anticipation, full of joy, full of love. She tells you, very quietly, that the flowers are her friends, her oldest friends, that she can hardly wait to see them again, that even in winter she thinks of them. You understand at once. It's not obsessive interest, not morbid, but genuine, deep affection for nature, for this wonder of flowers, so small yet so powerful, representing lifelines thousands of years old. The train stops. The botanist stands up, very slowly, very carefully. She takes her equipment, her rucksack, her notebook. She looks out the window up at the mountains, and you see how her eyes shine. Then she's gone, climbs out, goes out into the clear air of Lienz. You watch her go. She walks to the station cafe, will probably have a coffee, will check her notes. Then she'll go up. You can see it in the way she walks, in the way she breathes. She goes to her flowers, to her mountain, to her passion. The train starts up again, and you lean back. The mountains are still there, still green and white, still full of life. And somewhere up there on the Großglockner's slopes, the gentians will bloom, and the enzians, and all the little wonderful flowers. The botanist will see them, will document them, will love them. Your eyes grow ever heavier. The rhythm of the train sings you a lullaby. The mountains, the flowers, the botanist, they all slowly disappear into a gentle dream, and you know that all over the world there are people with such passions, such loves. And that's comforting, beautiful knowledge. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then the images came behind my eyelids. No clear pictures, just colors, soft colors, blue and gray, and a little gold from the lamp in the compartment. And these colors mixed into something that was no longer seeing and not yet dream. The train continued, ta-dum, ta-dum, and each ta-dum was a bit further away, as if the train was no longer quite in the same space as me, as if I was already half elsewhere, half in that land where tiredness lives, where everything simply becomes. The train heads to Oberstdorf, and you're sitting by the window. It's May, late afternoon, late May, and the sun shines in flat, golden angles into the Algoy Mountains. It's greener here than in the Carvendale. The meadows are lush and full of spring life, almost summery in their abundance. You notice the train slowing, that you're getting closer to Oberstdorf, that the mountains grow larger, that houses become rarer. And your thoughts grow sluggish, slower too, as if the mountain itself were rocking you to rest. Beside you sits a young woman, not older than 30, with a sun-weathered face and hands that smell of wool and earth, of stable work. She's a shepherd, a sheep herder, and this is the first time she's going alone with the flock to the spring pasture, alone without an older herder at her side, without guidance. You can see she's nervous, tense, but also proud and excited in a quiet, concentrated way. She has a large rucksack on her lap, and in a bag beside her are ropes and bandages and a thick notebook where she's written down the names of all the lambs, their colors, their mothers, their peculiarities. The rails sing their old song, the familiar rhythm song, and the train rocks you gently back and forth. The woman tells you about the lambs very calmly, about each one individually, about its peculiarities, its personality, its way of being. There's a little lamb with black patches that's too fast, always running away, full of energy. There's a ram that's particularly brave, courageous, that leads the others, that already seems like a little king. There are several that are still dependent on their mothers, that still drink, that are too delicate for long days. There are some that are already strong, that already eat independently, and they're all under her responsibility, under her care. She tells you about the responsibility, and you feel that she takes it seriously, that she's spent the whole winter thinking about it, worrying about it. When do the lambs eat independently? When can they bear the cold? How long do they still need their mothers? What do I do if one of the lambs goes lame or gets sick? What if one won't eat the food? She's talked to the older herders, written everything down, asked questions, and listened. And now she's going alone to the pasture with her flock, alone with the responsibility. You imagine what it will be like for her tomorrow morning when the flock wakes. The sun comes early in May, very early, and the lambs will play, skip, run over the meadows in the morning cool. She'll have to watch that none injures itself on sharp stones, that none wanders too far, that none eats too much, too fast. The older sheep will take the lead, the mothers will follow their instincts, but the lambs are wild, full of energy, full of joy at the green pasture, the meadow, the new grasses, the new flowers. You notice the young woman gazing out the window, and her thoughts are already with the flock, with the pasture, with the work ahead of her. She'll spend the next weeks up there on the Alp with the sheep and lambs. She'll be alone, but not lonely, because the sheep are her company. She'll raise the lambs, will watch them grow stronger, will watch them grow brave. The air smells of meadow, of grass just growing. The scent comes in through the window, sweet and fresh. The Algoy Mountains are gentler than the Carvendale, less dramatic, but no less beautiful. They're greener, friendlier, as if someone painted them with love. And in this moment, with the warm sun and the smell of the spring pasture, you understand why the woman does this, why she takes on the responsibility. She shows you a drawing she's made, a simple picture of the flock on the pasture. The drawing isn't artistically perfect, but it's full of life, full of movement. The lambs skip, the mothers hold together. One sheep looks directly at you, brave, curious. The herder herself isn't in the drawing, but you feel her presence, her attention. You ask her if she's nervous, and she laughs quietly. Yes, of course she's nervous, but she's also ready. She's prepared, she knows the lambs, and she knows the Alp. She's been there many times, but always with someone else. Now it's her responsibility, her decision, her flock. It's a big thing, an important moment in her life. The train rounds a curve, and suddenly you see the pasture, large and green, with trees at the edges. The mountains behind are shrouded in mist, gentle, mysterious. That's the pasture where the herder will be for the next weeks. You can see in her face that this is the moment when her reality begins. She gathers her things, even though the train hasn't stopped yet. She's ready. Her eyes are clear, focused. She's afraid, yes, but it's a good fear, a fear mixed with anticipation. She'll go up to this pasture and she'll tend the lambs, and she'll learn what it means to be a herder. Not just a helper, but a herder. The train slows gently, and you notice the journey is ending. Oberstdorf comes closer, down in the valley. The woman stands up very slowly, very solemnly, as if this were a sacred moment. She puts her rucksack on her shoulders, takes the bag with the ropes and the notebook where all her notes are. She smiles at you, a smile full of hope and determination, full of fear and full of joy. Then she's gone, off to her new life, off to the flock. You watch her as she stands on the platform, small against the great mountains, the green mountains behind. A tractor comes by and the herder climbs on with her rucksack and her bag. The tractor drives away, up into the mountains, the green May mountains, and the woman is gone, vanished into her new task. But you know she's not alone, that she's not lost. The flock is waiting for her. The sheep are already on the slope, and the lambs are already impatient, already ready to be led by their new herder. The train starts up again, and you lean back very slowly, very tired now. The swaying of the train rocks you gently now, like a great rocking that the mountain itself offers you. The Allgäu Mountains glide past, ever greener, ever fuller of life, ever fuller of sheep sounds you dream in your head. And you think of the young herder up there on the pasture with the lambs, with the flock, in the solitude that isn't lonely. You think about how she'll wake tomorrow morning very early, how the sun will wake the pasture, golden and warm, how the lambs will play, skip, run over the green slopes. Your eyes grow heavy, so heavy you can barely keep them open. The rhythm of the train is like the breathing of the mountains, like the pulse of nature itself. The woman will manage this task, so big yet so right for her. The lambs will grow and become strong, will learn to love the pasture, and you'll fall asleep into the safety of the moving rails, into the certainty that everything has its time, that everything will be all right, and that spring everywhere in the Allgäu is doing its great work, day by day, slowly and unstoppably. The herder up there on the pasture won't know that you're thinking of her, but your thoughts accompany her anyway, accompany the flock, accompany the lambs in their great adventure. And that's enough. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people are sleeping now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us. And everything is in its place. The fields are in their place. The forests are in their place. The rivers are in their place. And I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle of wood and fabric and metal that carries me where I need to go, without my having to stay awake, without my having to do anything but trust and rest. Imagine you're sitting in a train compartment heading to Mittenwald, and outside the snow melt is beginning. It's May, early May still, and the Carwendel Mountains are painted against the bright sky. The sun warms the glass, and you notice how your eyes grow slowly heavier. The train hisses quietly, evenly, and with every kilometer you grow calmer. Your shoulders sink down. The smell of the train, that familiar aroma of metal and old wood, wraps round you like a warm blanket. The air smells of damp stone and melting snow. Beside you sits a woman, not young anymore, but with the alert eyes of someone who's watched the mountains for decades. She has a green notebook on her lap, and her hands are rough from work outside, from cold and wet and harsh mountain air. She's a snowmelt observer for a university in Innsbruck, and today is one of her measuring days, one of many she does every spring. She looks out the window, and you can see she's made many of these train journeys. The rails sing beneath the train, a steady humming that draws you deeper into rest. It's an old, familiar song, the song of the rails, sounding always the same wherever you are. Through the windows, you see the mountain streams, swollen with snow, roaring and wild. The Carwindel streams are strong now, silvery gray and loud, full of energy. They race over stones that lay in ice since autumn, flushing away old gravel and small branches. The woman points to a measuring station on the bank, a small white hut by the stream where she'll have to stop later. She knows this station like her own home. She tells you about her work, quietly, not hurried, not impatient. Every May she comes here to record the water levels, to measure the depths, to note the flow speed. She knows every little stream, every small spring between the rocks, every place where the water flows differently. She knows when it runs too fast, when the snowmelt is at its peak, when it slows down, when the snow above is almost gone. It's work that requires incredible patience and time and a deep, quiet love for nature's silent details, the things most people don't notice. She enjoys it. You can see that when you listen to her. You imagine how tomorrow morning she'll go to the streams with her thermometer in her pocket and her green notebook under her arm. How she'll reach into the cold stream to measure the temperature, and how the icy water will make her fingers numb. But she'll still count every second precisely. But she enjoys doing it, you can see that. She tells you quietly that the streams in the Carwindel are like the veins of some great living being. You can see if the mountain is well if you just listen, if you look carefully at the color and speed and temperature of the water. Already halfway to Mittenwald now, and you notice the train slowing, as if it itself felt it was approaching its destination. The mountains grow larger, closer. Still snow on the higher peaks, white and pure and untouched. But below it, green, where grass is beginning to return, where the meadows are starting to wake. The snow is no longer like winter snow, hard and gray and impenetrable. It's become transparent, fleeting, brittle, as if it could vanish any moment, as if it knew its time was over. The woman looks out the window, completely concentrated, and you see in her face all the satisfaction of her work. She's in no hurry, no rush in her manner. She has all day for her measurements, tomorrow too, and the day after. She'll visit every stream, will climb down to every little spring, and in the evening she'll record her figures. And then she'll know that the mountains are still alive, that the water flows as it should, as it has flowed for 1,000 years. Outside, it smells of damp forest floor, of earth waking up. The forest smells of resin and of the sweet, fresh scent of meltwater. It's a soothing smell, an aroma that tells you the world is in order, that spring is doing its work, that everything is taking its natural course. High on the slopes, you see the first small flowers, alpine violets perhaps, or snowdrops, little white stars. Nature is incredibly swift when warmth comes, when the sun shines longer. You think about what it must feel like to watch these streams year after year, decade after decade. The woman beside you has perhaps spent 20 or 30 years making the same measurements, in the same places, in the same seasons. She knows the fluctuations, the normal changes that belong to the natural rhythm. She knows when there was too much snow in winter because the streams are wilder, wider, louder. She knows when it's going to be a dry year because the water levels are already dropping, already in May. The train rolls through a valley, slower and slower, and on the other side you see the mountain slopes, not yet green, but no longer white. It's the color of early spring in the Alps, that grayish-brown that only shows briefly before everything turns green. It's the transition color, the time between, the precious time that doesn't last long. And over everything, this clear, cold sky, as blue as no other sky in the year, so pure and bright. Somewhere in the distance, you hear cowbells. They're still faint, not yet the loud, cheerful bells of summer when thousands of cows are on the high pastures. These are rather hesitant bells, bells that say the herds will soon come out to graze, that it won't be long now. The woman beside you smiles quietly, very quietly. She hears the bells every spring at the same place, and every time it's as if she's hearing them for the first time. Every time it touches her heart. Mittenwald is approaching, closer and closer. The station is small, quiet, down in the valley. The train slows gently, very gently. You know the woman will get out soon, that her work is beginning. She'll take her bags and go out into the clear mountain air, and all day she'll watch the streams, measure them, record them. Tomorrow she'll be back in the train, and the day after, another route, another stream. But now, in this moment, in the slowly moving train, with the sun warm on your face and the smell of the Alps in your nose, you feel part of this quiet, patiently undertaken work. You're not the scientist measuring and writing, but you understand why she does it, where this quiet passion comes from. You understand the love for these mountains, this unshakable, quiet devotion. The train stops. The woman stands up very slowly, very carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb anything. She smiles at you, a brief, warm smile, and then she's gone, out into the clear mountain air of the Carwendel. You watch her as she stands on the platform with her green notebook under her arm, looking down at the streams that glimmer silver in the light, mysterious, alive. And you feel how peace wraps itself completely round you, very slowly. How the gentle rocking of the train, starting up again, lets you sink deeper into the state between waking and dreaming, that place where the most beautiful thoughts arise. The mountains are still there, the streams still roar, the snowfields still gleam in the sun. But your eyes grow so heavy, and you could just fall asleep. The spring in the Carwendel streams will do its work with or without you, and that's a beautiful, comforting feeling. At dawn, the streams will be even louder. The woman will know that the night has brought warmth and that the mountains have perspired in the warm sun of the day. She'll make her measurements, and she'll be happy in a quiet way that has nothing to do with excitement. It's a satisfaction that sits in the bones when you know you're doing the right thing. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then the images came behind my eyelids. No clear pictures, just colors, soft colors, blue and gray and a little gold from the lamp in the compartment. And these colors mixed into something that was no longer seeing and not yet dream. The train continued, ta-dum, ta-dum, and each ta-dum was a bit further away, as if the train was no longer quite in the same space as me, as if I was already half elsewhere, half in that land where tiredness lives, where everything simply becomes. The route from Neustadt to Kaiserslautern through the Palatinate is full of history and autumn. The train runs through forests, past old castles on distant hills, and everywhere you see the oaks, those mighty ancient trees with their brown acorns. And this evening, a woman got into my compartment carrying dozens of small brown acorns in her rucksack, neatly packed in linen bags. Her name was Maria, and she was an Acorn Miller, a craftswoman of an almost completely forgotten art. Maria explained to me that she gathers and processes acorns to make a coffee substitute. That's an old tradition, she said with emphasis. The people of the Palatinate did that during the wars when real coffee wasn't to be had. But it's more than just a substitute. It's its own drink, with its own taste, its own power. And it's almost completely forgotten in modern times when coffee comes from all over the world. She described the technique to me precisely, how you process acorns. First, you have to gather them when they're ripe in autumn. You have to tell the good from the bad, have to clean them, remove the shell. Then you have to dry them slowly, patiently. Then you have to roast them, just like coffee, but in a special process where you have to extract the bitterness. She showed me her collection, acorns at different stages. There were the fresh, just gathered acorns with their caps. There were the shelled ones, whitish, like little ivory balls. There were the dried ones, turning dark brown. And there were the finished, roasted ones, blackish brown, with a wonderful smell of roasting and earth. Each phase had its own beauty, its own story. Maria told me about her first encounter with acorn milling. She was a child in the Palatinate after the war, when coffee was still rare. She sat in her grandmother's kitchen and watched the old woman prepare the acorns. The scent was intoxicating, said Maria, sweet, dark, like looking into the depths of nature. She fell in love in that moment with this work, with this craft. She described the processing in more detail. After you've dried the acorns, you have to grind them to a fine powder. Then you have to roast the powder, but not like coffee, at a low temperature, very slowly. The process takes hours, sometimes days. You have to be there, have to stir, have to check how it's developing. It's almost meditative work, work of patience. Maria also showed me old family recipes, handwritten notebooks from the 19th century. They had exact instructions for making, for storage, for use. It was fascinating to see how much knowledge was in those old papers. She'd copied them all out, modernized the recipes, but also tried to preserve the old knowledge. "That's my treasure," she said, "my most valuable possession." I asked her what the acorn coffee tasted like. She smiled mysteriously and described it to me. "It's hard to describe," she said. "It tastes like the forest, of earth, of old wood, with a note of sweetness and a note of bitterness. It's spicy without the acidity of real coffee. It warms you from inside, soothes you, makes you thoughtful. The old people said acorn coffee makes your thoughts clearer, that it opens the heart." Maria told me about the old names her grandmother still knew. Acorn coffee was also called acorn brew or forest coffee, or sometimes just the heavy drink. People took this drink seriously. It wasn't cheap, not minor, but valuable. It was a drink that gave strength, that warmed the soul. She described the different kinds of oak she used. There was the pedunculate oak with its larger acorns. There was the sessile oak with its smaller, more intense fruits. Each oak species gave a slightly different coffee substitute, with its own nuances, its own aromas. Maria was like a sommelier, an expert in the tastes and qualities of her acorns. She also told me she experiments with other forest fruits. She tries mixing acorn coffee with walnut leaves, with dried apples, with nuts. Each mixture had its own character, its own taste. She was like an artist playing with the raw materials of the forest. The forest was her palate. She spoke about the autumn days in the Palatinate when the acorns fall. Then she's out and about with large sacks, gathering, collecting. She knows the best trees, the best places where acorns fall most abundantly. She has a system for how she gathers, how she works, how she achieves the best quality. It's not random work, but planned, thoughtful, careful. She also described how her grandmother, during the war, mixed the acorns with other things, with grain, with corn, to stretch the coffee substitute. Back then, every acorn was valuable, said Maria. You couldn't waste any. Poverty was a great teacher, she said, because it taught you to value small things. Now, when acorns are everywhere and the supermarket is full of coffee, it takes love to keep the tradition alive. She told me about her workplace, an old house in the Palatinate where she processes her acorns. She has a large roaster there, an old thing, maybe 100 years old. She has baskets full of acorns at different stages. It constantly smells of roasting, of nuts, of forest. It's her kingdom, her temple of craftsmanship. She described how she preserves acorn milling, how she tries to pass on the knowledge. Sometimes she teaches, shows interested people the techniques. She sells to small shops, to people who understand that craft has value. It's not much money, but it's enough to keep the work alive, to preserve the tradition. She also told me about the people who come to her to try Acorn coffee. Some are tourists, some are locals who remember the old times. She prepares the coffee in her kitchen, brews it slowly, and the scent fills the whole house. People sometimes weep when they taste it for the first time. It's like a memory of something they'd forgotten, of their grandmother, of their childhood. "That's my real work," said Maria. "Not the selling, but these moments." She also told me about her hopes for the future. She'd like to open a small cafe, a tiny place where people could come to taste the Acorn coffee, to feel the forest scent, to understand the history. Not to make money, but to nourish the soul. "That's my dream," she said. "Before I get too old, I want a few people to understand that the old world isn't completely gone, that it lives with us, in the acorns, in the forests." And when we arrived in Kaiserslautern, Maria gave me a small packet of Acorn coffee. She said, "Try that when you can't sleep. The acorns are gifts from the forest. They carry the strength of the earth within them, the strength of time. Drink the coffee warm, slowly, and you'll understand what the old people understood." And you, dear listener, can now close your eyes and imagine sitting under an old oak, how the leaves fall around you, how the forest scent surrounds you, how you hold a glass of warm acorn coffee, and how the warmth slowly, very gently, carries you into sleep. The autumn embraces you, the oak shelters you, and old wisdom flows through your veins. My eyes grew heavy, so heavy, as though someone had gently laid a warm hand on my eyelids and said, "Now it's all right. Now it's enough for today." And I heard the train, ta-dum, ta-dum. And I heard the quiet breathing of another traveler already asleep. And I heard the distant whisper of wind at the window panes. And all these sounds were like a soft blanket laid over me, layer by layer, warmth by warmth, until I felt nothing but the train's smooth gliding through the night. The train rolled on so gently, and outside the world was all darkness now. Just a few lights in the distance, odd windows where other people too were settling down to rest. I thought about how many people in the world were falling asleep at that very moment, each in their bed, in their compartment, in their room, and how we were all part of one great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of some great, friendly creature carrying us all together through the darkness, through time.